Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 3 of the Second Amendment Liberal Podcast. I'm your host, Brad. Those of you who tuned in last time may be expecting part 2 of episode 2, but due to scheduling conflicts with my guest, that will have to be postponed, but I assure you it is coming, so hold your horses and stay tuned. Today we're going to be discussing top 10 guns that I secretly want but probably will never buy. I'm sure that we all have lists similar to this. So today we're going to explore my list and my reasons why I will probably never buy them. My number 10 is predictably the Taurus Judge or Smith & Wesson Governor or similar 45 Colt 410 chambered handguns. The concept sounds pretty sweet, you know? A shotgun handgun, where can you go wrong with that? Unfortunately, 410 out of such a short barrel is not the most optimal thing in the world. Now, you could just carry a 45 Colt, but then what's the point? You might as well just get a dedicated 45 Colt handgun, and Smith & Wesson and Ruger make some fantastic ones. The ammunition that is available for these handguns is not the most effective thing you can use for self-defense. They make pretty good snake guns, but that's about it. Now, there are some cartridges. I think there's some from Hornady, Winchester, and Lehigh Defense. I think they make some pretty decent ones, but for the price, it's just a little too expensive for the performance that you get. Also, 45 Colt is relatively expensive. There are much better self-defense rounds that will do the same job, if not better than 45 Colt, for a much lower price. So you'll be able to pack in more range time with better handguns, 9mm, 45 ACP, etc., etc. So that is why I will probably never buy one. But if I do, I will never use it for anything serious. Number 9 is the FN57. I think it's a fantastic firearm, but there's a lot of downsides. Number 1 being the ammunition in terms of cost and availability, as well as performance. The ammunition that is offered to the public, I don't think shares the armor penetrating capability as the one that is sold to law enforcement and military organizations. So that right there is a big blow to my desire to have one. The other concerns is the actual cost of the weapon itself. They're very expensive for what you get. Also, the trigger is not that great. The safety is also in a weird position, and as someone that is a big fan of the 1911 platform, it's just entirely unintuitive to me. I'm generally a fan of FN's products, especially their handguns. The FNS, the FN509, the FNX, the FNP series, all great, fantastic firearms. And FN does have a great R&D department. But when it comes to this weapon, I feel like it just falls short. It sounds like I'm hating on this weapon and that I don't really like it. Believe me, I would love to have one, but I'm not rushing out to the store to get one. Number 8 is anything chambered in .327 Federal Magnum. On paper, again, this is something that looks great, sounds effective, and it is. I think it is an underrated cartridge, and I think is a really good alternative to .357 Magnum if it weren't for ammunition availability and ammunition cost. Even the reloading components for .327 Federal Magnum are quite expensive, and if you don't reload, what you pay per box at the store is quite outrageous in my opinion. Even the firearms themselves are more expensive than that of what you would find in .357 Magnum. For instance, I often find Ruger LCRs in .327 to be about $100 on average more expensive than that of those chambered in .357 Magnum. Great cartridge, great performance, just too damn expensive. Number 7 is Henry lever actions. Henry, if you're listening, please, for the love of all that is holy, please put a loading gate on your rifles. I want to buy your products. They're very high quality. They're American made. I want to support American jobs. But Henry, I don't want to have to unscrew a tube, pull it out, drop rounds down this tube, and then screw it back in. Now, I understand for the history aficionados, yes, you want that. You want to retain that feature from the original weapons. But I want something that is viable and easy to reload under stress in a self-defense context, because there are states out there where basically the only thing you can use is a lever-action rifle for self-defense. And people don't want to buy a Marlin because their quality control has been shoddy lately. I hear horrible things all the time about Mossberg lever actions not being the best. Winchesters are just way too expensive. Rossis are, I don't know, are they out of production, in production? I can't find them anywhere anymore. So those are out of the question. Please, Henry, please. Loading gate. Number 6 is the Lionheart LH9. I am a huge fan of the Daewoo pistols with that double action plus mode. It's fantastic. It's a pretty damn good idea. But the Lionheart pistols are so damn expensive, and I do not think that the double action plus mode is worth the extra cost over other more traditional double action, single action platforms. You're going to hear me complain a lot about cost on this list. And rightfully so. I'm not made of money. Please support the Patreon, by the way. And I'm assuming that the people who listen to this podcast are not either. Cost is a major concern. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I also believe these are imported pistols. So parts availability is going to be a problem. And I like to have a mess of parts on hand just in case something goes wrong. I don't want to have to send it back to the manufacturer or the importer or wait for parts to come in the mail. I want a lot of parts on hand. So that's why, despite me really wanting one, I will probably never buy one. And here comes Henry again with the number 5 spot with the AR-7. Now, what I'm about to say is probably going to piss off a lot of people, but hey, it's just how I feel, and I gotta say it. I am not a fan of 22 LR. I don't have fun shooting it. I don't find the weapons that are chambered in this caliber to be particularly interesting. I just do not enjoy it. That said, the AR-7 is very much interesting to me. I like the survival aspect of it, the stowaway aspect of it, how it can float in water. I just like everything about the design except for the fact that it's chambered in 22. I want this chambered in 9mm, 45 ACP, or even beef the design up to chambered in 5.56. I want to really like this rifle. I want to own it, but at the same time, I just can't justify it due to my disdain and dislike of 22 LR. I know people use 22 to defend themselves all the time. I know it is lethal. I know what it can do. I just don't like it. And that's good enough for me to probably never buy this or any 22, really, for that matter. Number 4 is military surplus weapons. I actually got into the gun game back when these surplus weapons were plentiful and cheap, and I assume that most of us did. And I'm talking about with Mosin Nagants, AKs, TT-33s, things like that. Now the price of these has gone up, and so has the barrier of entry. Ammunition used to be plentiful. It has long since dried up, and the cost has risen as well. They're just not a practical way to really get into guns as much as it used to be. Also, I broke parts constantly. I had a Beretta 92S. I broke so many safety levers. I don't know what was wrong with the metallurgy on the safety levers for those, but something was wrong there. I don't know what it was. I also did the same with a Yugoslavian SKS. I broke the safety lever on that twice. Maybe I just have strong thumbs. Who knows? But that is why I will probably never buy any more foreign military surplus weapons. I enjoy them for their history, but I just can't justify buying them anymore. Number 3 on this list is the Beretta ARX 100. Unlike most people, I actually find the aesthetics to be quite pleasing. But there's a number of tiny flaws that just add up to become one huge irritation. The primary thing being its incompatibility with a lot of AR-15 magazines. I feel that is unacceptable, and why that was not factored into the original design of the weapon is just beyond me, especially if you're going to market it on the American market. I think the trigger, it needs a little work. I don't know if there's any aftermarket triggers available, but I haven't seen any. There were promises of all kinds of modular adaptations in a 308 version, but they just never came to be for the American market. Now they're trying to get rid of them. They're selling them at lower prices, and that was a huge problem when it hit market. First was the gigantic cost, but you don't have a lot of features as compared to similar weapons. And I just could not justify buying one then, and I can't justify buying one now, despite a small part in the back of my brain that wants to get one anyways, just for the hell of having one. Number 2 is American-made AKs. I think everyone is well aware by now that by and large, most American-made AKs are basically flaming piles of hot garbage. They break all the time. They're not well made. They're just not a good product. And we should have expected this, because you cannot compare these companies making something for the first time to these organizations overseas who have been making them since the 1950s, basically. They've got it down to a science over there. We do not. Now, I do still want to grab one and compare it to some of the foreign-made ones, but I don't know. I don't want to pay for something that's low quality. And it's a shame that we have to say that about an American product, but hey, all is fair in love and war, and I feel as they are right now, they've kind of lost that war, if you know what I mean. Probably never buy one. Number 1 on this list is probably going to surprise most people. It is the Browning High Power. Recently, they just went out of production, and that makes me sad. I've never really got around to owning one, and this is probably the one on the list I want to own the most, but I'll probably never get one because, number 1, the cost. They cost way too much money. Number 2, there are more viable, more modern, more capable platforms. The High Power, comparatively, is an older platform. It's outmoded, it's outdated, it's obsolescent. It has less magazine capacity. The trigger is not as good as what you can get on something like a CZ75. It's just not enough going for it, other than how classic it is, how prolific it is. It's just not enough there to justify me jumping in and making a purchase. They look beautiful, and they appeal to me because I'm a Browning fan. I like 1911s. I love all that stuff, but there's just not enough going for it, and it has too much competition these days. I love them, but I just can't justify owning one, and I do not consider the clones made by FEG out of Hungary, the Israeli clones, and now the Turkish clones. I don't consider those to be alternatives, because if you're gonna, you don't buy a fake Gucci bag and feel proud of it. Do you know what I mean? It's a similar thing here. Get a Browning if you want a Browning, and that's probably why I'll never own one, unless someone wants to sell me one for a decent price. But hey, I'm just throwing that out there. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but no doubt I've mentioned some guns that you probably feel the same about. What are some guns that you want to buy, but probably never will? Go ahead and drop me a line at Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Patreon at /2aliberal podcast. Let me know what you think. This is your host, Brad. Unfortunately, we don't have any advertisers at the moment. Thankfully, Patreon has us covered. As most people are aware, social media entities across the internet are clamping down on the ability for gun-related content producers to fund their projects. Your support on Patreon gives those of us here at the Second Amendment Liberal podcast the ability to keep the lights on. As this project grows, expect interviews with interesting and notable people in the gun world, reviews of cool gun-related products, and travel to locations around the country to get the scoop on stories that otherwise would be out of reach.
I have big things planned for the future of this podcast, folks. For $3 a month, you can pledge your support on Patreon. As things develop and take off around here, there will be all sorts of tiers and perks. If you find yourself unable to support us monetarily, hey, that's cool. I understand. I know money is tight for many people right now, and I just appreciate you listening. Go to patreon.com/2A Liberal Podcast. The number 2, the letter A, Liberal Podcast, and become a patron today. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, folks, that's it for the episode today. I really do appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time.